Fiordland is the least populated area of New Zealand, virtually uninhabited, and much of it inaccessible except by boat or air. The main economic activity is tourism. The area's spectacular beauty and awe-inspiring sense of isolation drawing people from all over the world. Few New Zealanders ever visit Fiordland, however, apart from hunters and trampers. But despite this very modest role in present-day New Zealand life, it was this region that was the earliest focus for European visitors to southern New Zealand, beginning with Captain Cook. Cook first sailed past the Fiordland coast in 1770 and returned for a significant sojourn here on his second voyage in 1773. As a result of his careful charting of Dusky Sound, it became a favoured destination for other explorers who followed him, and then for the first sailing parties from Sydney. For 4 decades, it proved the most popular stopping-off point for Europeans in the south. Several important firsts can be located here during this period. The first and second brewery in New Zealand, the first European-style ship to be built in New Zealand, the first recorded shipwreck, and the first European women and children to live in the country. All of these stories centre on Tamatea Dusky Sound. Home now to wildlife and occasional tourists, a team from Toitū Otago Settlers Museum and Heritage New Zealand, with the help of local tour operator Fiordland Expeditions, sets out on a mission of rediscovery. The aim is to see what remains from that historic era and share these remarkable stories of what was, for both Maori and European, the furthest frontier. Captain Cook was the first known European to explore the southern coastline, and his work ultimately connected Otago to the rest of the world. His ship Endeavour approached Fiordland from the south in March 1770, continuing the clockwise circumnavigation of the South Island that had taken it past Otago and in a wide sweep around Stewart Island, mistaking it for a peninsula. Cook brought his ship in close to Dusky and Doubtful Sounds, looking for a sheltered bay where he could rest his men and find wood and water. He thought he'd found a suitable location on the 14th of March when he spotted a great deep bay with a strip of level woodland adjacent to it. Its entranceway was marked by 5 remarkable high-peaked rocks that thrust skywards like the fingers on a man's hand. But it was getting towards dusk, too dark to attempt an entrance, and during the night, strong winds blew up and drove them northward. Reluctantly, Cook abandoned the potential shelter, naming it Dusky Bay. But he tucked away its location for future reference and described it in detail in his journal.
Close behind these hills lies the ridges of mountains, which are of a prodigious height, and appear to consist of nothing but barren rocks, covered in many places with large patches of snow, which perhaps have laid there since the creation. No country upon earth can appear with a more rugged and barren aspect as this doth from the sea. As far inland as the eye can reach, nothing can be seen but the summits of these rocky mountains, which seem to lie so near one another as not to admit of any valleys between them.
3 years later, Cook returned. He'd just spent 4 months navigating through the icebergs of Antarctica, his ship bashed and smashed by the huge winds and waves of the southern latitude, and he needed somewhere where he could rest his men, replenish his supplies, and repair his ship. So he headed straight for Dusky Bay, and the Resolution dropped anchor here at Anchor Point on the 26th of March 1773, and it must have seemed an idyllic location after the rigours of the previous few months. The green of the bush, the grey of the rock and the translucent waters, while flocks of birds sent out their calls to echo around the sound. Next day, Lieutenant Richard Pickersgill found this safer anchorage on the southeast side of the sound, and it's still called Pickersgill Harbour in his honour. They brought the ship in through a very narrow entrance channel, quite amazing feat of seamanship, and then into the safety of the harbour. They wedged the ship hard up against the trees here, and this was to be their spot for the next few weeks of rest and repair. And no sooner was the ship secured than, according to Cook's Polish-born naturalist George Forster, every man on board had his hook and line over and began to haul fresh fish in, sign of good things to come. Food remained a major preoccupation during the crew's time here, as well as the fish. There were plenty of birds and there were seals to be shot, and the men went out hunting every day and feasted mightily throughout their time here. All in all, they found it an idyllic spot, marred only by a couple of things. A plague of sandflies, which Cook described in his journal as exceeding the worst thing in their kind he'd ever struck anywhere, and the continuous rainfall. But despite being almost constantly wet, they thrived, they enjoyed it, they loved their time here in Pickersgill Harbour. Cook also brewed beer here using this lovely fresh water from Cook Stream, as well as the leaves of Rimu and Manuka trees growing just behind me here in the bush. It was one of his famous antidotes to scurvy. Now, like most home brewers, Cook thought his spruce beer was fantastic stuff, but the sailors don't seem to have minded drinking it either. In any case, he gave them no choice. He cut off their rum ration while it was available. This was in fact the site of New Zealand's first brewery. The Resolution needed substantial repair and maintenance after its Antarctic battering. So an acre of trees were chopped down here at the head of the point. Workshops were set up for the blacksmiths, forge, the sail makers, the coopers. They repaired barrels to load up all the fresh water they were going to get from the stream at the end of the anchorage there. And altogether it was a hive of activity over the next few weeks. And all those trees they cut down, the stumps, some of them are still here in the bush, and it's the earliest evidence of European activity anywhere in New Zealand.
This is maritime archaeologist Matt Carter's first expedition to Tamatea Dusky Sound. And he can't help but admire the choice of location for the Resolution's anchorage and refit.
I guess the big surprise was just how perfect the cove was for what Cook used it for. So bringing the ship in shallow so they could really refit and fix everything. It was just the perfect location. They completely sheltered and potentially could actually sit the ship on the bottom nice and flat, and so when the tide went down, scrub the sides, get all the marine growth off. So really perfect for that.
An observatory was also erected here in this clearing, which gave it its name Astronomer's Point, because one of the expedition's scientific tasks was to accurately fix the geographical position of the New Zealand landmass. And using state-of-the-art technology, Harrison's newly developed chronometer, and fixing the points of latitude and longitude, William Wales, the astronomer, was able to determine precisely the position of New Zealand, which meant that 250 years before the invention of global positioning satellites, New Zealand, this point here, was the most accurately fixed geographical place in the entire globe.
Today, Pickersgill Harbour remains a favourite site for visitors to Tamatea Dusky Sound. Because of its significance as a heritage area, Matt Carter and fellow maritime archaeologist Kurt Bennett are looking forward to entering the water and seeing if the Resolution left anything behind.
So Pickersgill Harbour, the significance comes down to Cook when he was there for that 5-week period, and the third longest anchorage he had in New Zealand. And so the idea was there could really be some archaeological potential of them sitting there for 5 weeks, stuff going over the side and still being on the seabed there. And from a maritime archaeological point of view, the fact that no one had ever done a systematic, methodical survey was really significant for us. We could get in there and do that for the first time.
So the idea was to sort of work around the footprint of the ship in case things went over the side,
And then if you extend it slightly further, then you're also capturing things that might have drifted, or if the boat wasn't exactly positioned where we thought it was. And there was a few little surprises, a few bottles and things, and one possible timber that it looked squared in shape and with a slight curve in it. So with it being squared, you think, well, perhaps it's cultural, it's been worked by someone. And it was difficult though to actually say yes or no, because it was degraded. So I mean, like shipworm, and just over time, it's just, yeah, the wood's just deteriorated. So it's lost its shape a little bit.
The archaeologists have performed what is known as a non-disturbance survey. Only pictures and measurements are taken, and anything of note is left in position pending further research. With the survey complete, they can now render a 3D model of the Resolution anchorage site to mark their findings and lodge their results with Heritage New Zealand. Their excitement is obvious.
Yeah, and I mean, it comes down to that famous angle of Cook being there and following that history. And the exciting thing about the archaeology is you're not just reading about it in a book, you're actually there doing it in the place where Cook was. And so to be able to search for it for the first time, it's this thrill of the unknown, the unexplored. You're on the bottom looking up and you're thinking, well, you know, Cook was above you in the ship there, and here we are sort of 200 years on and trying to look for things that might be evidence of his occupation there. So yeah, that was a real buzz.
During the Resolution 6-week stay here in Dusky Sound, berthed up at Pickersgill Harbour behind me, the Polish-born naturalists Johann and George Forster collected a whole raft of samples of local flora and fauna. Captain Cook made the first and highly accurate chart of Dusky Sound, and the expedition's artist William Hodges sketched and drew a whole heap of impressions of the magnificent scenery around here. And he also captured one of the most significant events of the whole expedition, the first encounter between Europeans and Southern Maori.
On the next episode of Furthest Frontier, Tales from Tamatea Dusky Sound, we explore the first meeting between Southern Maori and Captain Cook.
It would have been a brave thing to go out on that rock and go.
The two men then grasped each other's hands and exchanged a hongi.
But I think also it was a place of refuge. That kōrero would have been passed down, you know.
He was delighted and passed over his whalebone patu to the captain.